What if your last clear thought on earth is not peace, but the fear that you are not ready for what waits after death? I felt the stretcher moving, and the fluorescent lights streaking above me like dying stars. A near-death experience was something I watched on other people's screens, not my own life. Nurses rushed past. Machines fired their alarms. A doctor leaned over me with instructions I could not hear. Sound slipped away first, then color, then weight. My vision narrowed to a tunnel, smaller and smaller, until only one image stayed in focus. My mother in the hallway, eyes wet, lips shaping "I love you," and the ache of everything I had not said. Time stretched thin, faces blurred. My chest stopped fighting. Darkness did not fall like night. It rose slow and heavy, swallowing the room, the lights, the people, and finally me. If your heart stopped today, would you face that darkness ready? And will you comment your answer and press like "so I know you are here with me"? I opened my eyes, and there was nothing. Not a corner of light, not a wall, not a ceiling. Just a black that felt like it had weight. I tried to sit up, and my body answered like it was wrapped in wet cloth. Heavy arms, heavy chest, heavy thoughts. Part of me wanted to believe this was anesthesia or a fever dream. Another part knew better. Near-death experience was a phrase I had heard in documentaries. It was not supposed to be my first waking sentence. I pushed my palms under me to rise and saw a dim glow at the edges of the dark, a thin web of light running beneath the ground. It looked like cracks under glass, slow pulses moving through them like embers. I pressed harder to stand. Heat shot into my hands and I yanked them back on instinct. The sting was immediate, the kind that makes your stomach drop. I looked down and saw the skin swell. Not a symbol, not a metaphor, real blisters. My brain tried to throw excuses at it. Stress, memory, normal dream pain, but it would not file under fantasy. I tried to call out for help, for anyone, for God, for a nurse, for my mother, for a doctor. My mouth formed the words, and the silence ate them. No echo, no room tone, no distant hum, just the sense that sound was not allowed here. That was the first moment I felt small, not sick, not unlucky, but small, like I had been stepped outside of normal life and set down in a place that did not negotiate. I took a careful step. The surface held, but hissed at the contact. Another step, then another. The glow followed the pressure of my feet, drawing lines under me like a map I did not understand. I thought about all the stories that promise a tunnel and a warm welcome. I did not see a tunnel. I saw a floor made of burning glass and a night that refused to blink. I thought about judgment and mercy, and the years I used both words to win arguments instead of changing anything about myself. That thought landed hard. The longer I stood there, the more I felt watched. Not by eyes in the dark, but by memory. Choices I had dismissed as small knocked on the door of my mind one by one, patient and stubborn. Atheist or believer, this is the point where pride gets quiet. You do not care about labels when your hands are burned and your voice does not work. You care about truth. You care about what is real and why you are here. I bent to touch the surface again, slower this time, hoping careful would mean painless. It did not. I pulled back, holding my hands to my chest like a child who finally admits he is hurt. I looked around for anything that could explain the rules of this place. The dark did not answer. Then the first whisper slid through it, thin and far away, like a memory someone else was speaking out loud. Another followed, then a few more, building just enough to let me know I was not alone, and not in a way that brought comfort. I kept moving because standing still felt like agreeing to stay. The ground shifted from one kind of dark to another, like a room, changing moods without warning. At first it was only me and the glow under the cracks. Then shapes began to rise out of the distance, slow and unsure, as if they were learning to be people again and failing. Some crawled with stiff, broken motions. Others stood like statues that forgot how to breathe. Their eyes were empty, but I had the sick feeling they still saw. Not my face, my story. I told myself to keep walking. Near-death experience, I whispered in my mind like a label that could protect me. But labels do not carry you. One of the figures lifted an arm. The skin looked like it had been left on a fire too long. It reached toward me, not fast, not violent, The gesture looked like a child asking to be noticed. My chest tightened. I stepped back. Another figure took a dragging step forward. A third just stared, hands half raised, unsure whether to hope or give up. The nearest one touched my forearm. That was all. A simple touch. Blisters jumped to the surface of my skin as if they had been waiting for permission. I jerked away with a soundless cry and held my arm tight. The pain was immediate and personal. It felt like someone had turned a memory inside out and pressed it against me. I wanted to shout at the figure to stop, but it was already pulling its hand back with a look I recognized too well. Not anger, shame. I backed away and finally found my voice in my head. This is hell, I thought, and the word did not feel like a threat anymore. It felt like a diagnosis. The figures did not follow. They reached out and froze, like people stuck in a moment. Their mouths did not move, but the whispers did. A thin stream at first, then many. Snatches of sentences I knew but could not place. A joke I told that cut deeper than I meant. A promise I postponed until it died. Small choices that never felt final until now. Then came a voice I knew better than my own heartbeat. It was me. Not the me that tries to look good on holidays and in photos. The me that speaks when no one is listening. It said things I would have sworn I never believed. I heard myself dismiss a friend's pain. I heard myself justify a lie because the truth would cost me time. I heard myself think that grace was for people who tried harder than I had tried. Each line landed in the air and stayed, as if the room was keeping score. I turned in circles, trying to find a speaker, a wall, any source I could argue with. There was none, only a realization I did not want. My regrets were not hiding in my past. They were alive around me. They were the atmosphere of this place. They were the reason the ground glowed under my feet. I pressed my good hand over the blisters and felt the pulse of fear in my wrist. Believer or skeptic, this is the moment you stop debating and start remembering. Not theology, not philosophy, choices. Another figure crawled close enough to lift its face. For a second I thought I knew it. A co-worker I avoided when he needed help. A neighbor whose name I never learned. The brain reaches for excuses, but the soul knows. The empty eyes said what words could not. You were there. You walked by. You called it not your problem. I told myself to move. Anywhere. Away from the reaching hands and the voice that would not lie for me. I took a step, and the whispers gathered like wind before a storm. Not louder, just nearer, like they were preparing to show me something I had never let myself see. Before you continue with this content that shows you what it's like to stand face to face with eternal judgment, you need to check out the ebook, Secrets of Life. This book reveals deep teachings from the scriptures, truths long forgotten by many, lessons that will strengthen your faith, restore your spirit, and help you understand God's path even in your darkest moments. It's not just another book, it's a warning, a spiritual map for those who feel on the edge, between faith and emptiness, between the calling and the abyss. You don't have to wait for a life-altering wake-up call to open your eyes. After this video, click the link in the description and begin your spiritual turnaround today, because tomorrow might be too late. I walked until the ground felt like it was guiding me, not the other way around. And then I saw it standing by itself as if the darkness had grown around it. A mirror, not the kind you hang in a hallway, tall, warped at the edges, waiting. I told myself to keep moving, to treat it like another trick in a near-death experience, but my feet slowed and stopped. I looked for my face and met a version of me I didn't want to meet. Not a stranger. Me, burning. Skin peeling like paper. Eyes empty like the figures I had passed. Mouth open in a scream that made no sound at all. No sound here ever did. I turned away fast, like a kid refusing a lesson, but the burning stayed with me. It did not live in the glass. It lived on me. I checked my hands and saw blisters rising, angry and round, as if the place had signed its name, across my skin. I dragged my nails across my forearms in a panic, the way you do when you want a painful thought to stop, and it only spread the hurt. It felt unfair in a simple way. If this was a dream, my body should not keep score. That is when a very old memory clicked. In dreams, pain fades. In dreams, you wake and laugh it off. Here the pain had a plan. It stayed. It waited. It watched how I reacted, like judgment with patience. Something inside me went cold. I had called this a story about darkness, but the truth was simpler and worse. This was real enough to mark me, real enough to teach me, real enough to hold me to what I had been. I forced myself to face the mirror again, thinking maybe I could catch it lying. The reflection had not moved, but I could see more of it now, like the scene had cleared. The empty eyes were not hateful. They were cataloging, not who I pretended to be, but the choices I made when no one was looking. Little cuts, quiet pride, casual cruelty that I shrugged off as normal life. The burning matched those moments, not random, not chaos, targeted, honest. It hit the places I protect the most. I wanted a rule I could use, a prayer that would fix it, a sentence that would make the mirror show mercy. Believer or skeptic, we all reach for the same thing when the floor drops out. We want a way back. But the glass did not bargain. It delivered truth the way gravity delivers a fall. I felt the panic rise. Not the loud kind, the steady kind that grabs the steering wheel and won't let go. If the mirror was not lying, then this was no dream, and I could not think my way out of it. I had to face what came next, whether or not I liked what it wanted to show me. Something yanked me backward like a rip current. The mirror, the figures, the burning ground snapped away, and a hard white flooded everything. I thought I was falling. Then my chest slammed into air and I was on a hospital bed, mouth open, lungs fighting to catch up. Voices crowded. In. Hands pressed my shoulders. Someone kept saying my name the way you call a person who is walking too close to an edge. I blinked until faces formed. Masks, coats, a doctor nodding to a nurse. Someone said we got him. Someone else said keep him here. I tried to answer and only a scrape came out. The room was real. The ceiling tiles were real. The beeping I had missed so much was real. I had left darkness, but something was wrong. The pain had traveled with me. Not a memory, not a ghost. Pain, with weight. I lifted my hands and saw the skin, blistered, red, mapped with small circles like the ground I had walked on had signed its pattern across me. I pulled my arms to my chest on instinct. The nearest doctor leaned in, then leaned back with a look I will never forget. There was no fire, he said. We never intubated heat, no chemical burn, no equipment failure. He listed all the things that could have caused it and crossed each one out with a head shake. I wanted to tell him I understood. By their rules, this was impossible. By the rules of the place I had just left, it made perfect sense. I forced the words anyway. I told them I had been somewhere, not a dream, not anesthesia. I said the words near-death experience and watched the room split without anyone moving. Some faces softened the way people do when faith enters. Others stiffened with the quiet doubt of science. I didn't blame either side. I've lived in both. They took photos. They checked vitals. They whispered in the hall and came back with careful voices. One called it a stress response that broke the skin. Another called it an unknown reaction. The word miracle never made it past their teeth. I kept touching the edge of a blister like a man checking if a bad decision really happened. The pain proved itself again and again. It lingered. It refused to fade like dream pain does. It brought me right back to the mirror. My mother appeared at the doorway, smaller than I remembered, the way parents look when you finally see they are human. She touched my forehead and cried the way relief and fear mix when they don't know which one won. I told her I heard her. I love you. She nodded like a person who already knew I had. That night the monitors hummed and the hallway lights dimmed, and I lay awake, afraid to close my eyes, not because of death, but because of what waited in the dark behind it. The doctor said to rest. The nurse said I was safe now. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe this world had the final word, but my hand said otherwise, and every time I blinked, the silent scream in the glass leaned closer, as if reminding me there was still something I had to face next. Weeks passed, and the hospital smell faded from my clothes, but the burns did not fade from my skin. I sat alone most nights, holding my hands to the light, like a man trying to read a map he never asked for. The doctors had given me creams, appointments, a stack of paperwork that called it unexplained. Friends visited, careful with their eyes. Some told me to rest and let it go. Others asked if I'd had a vision from God or a trick of the brain. No one stayed long enough to hear the part that mattered. The mirror had not stayed there. It kept finding me here. Sleep should have been the easy thing. Close your eyes, drift, heal. Instead, I learned a new kind of fear. I feared sleep more than death, because the moment I slipped under, the glass arrived with perfect memory. Same empty eyes. Same silent scream. Same judgment that didn't shout. It simply revealed. I would snap awake with my heart racing and my hands hot, like the burns could think for themselves. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it would pass. The mirror did not care what I told myself. I started noticing something small that grew into something I could not ignore. The blisters weren't random anymore. They arranged in faint lines that looked like cracks, then letters, then a word I did not want to see, on my own body. Mercy. I rubbed the skin until it hurt, but the word stayed. Not carved, shown. Like the place I visited had left me a message in a language only pain could write. One evening, I pulled out the hospital discharge folder to prove to myself I was being dramatic. Tucked behind a lab printout was a copy of my chart with timestamps I hadn't read. They had lost my pulse for longer than anyone admitted to my face. Long enough for the nurses to step back and wait for a decision. Long enough for the doctor to say my name twice and then stop. Long enough for my mother to put her hand on the window and pray the way a person prays when there are no words left. I ran my finger down the margin and found a note from a night nurse I barely remembered. Patient cold to touch on return. Reports visual memory of being seen. That line shook me more than the flat line. Being seen was exactly what it felt like there. On a Sunday, I forced myself to sit in a church foyer because I wanted to test whether hope made the mirror weaker. I did not go inside. I just sat where I could hear soft voices and watch people carry coffee and kindness. A man in his 60s stood beside me without introduction. He didn't quote scripture or talk science. He just said sometimes the fire is not punishment. Sometimes the fire is truth burning away the lie. He squeezed my shoulder and walked off like he had given me a weather report. I checked my hands without thinking. The letters were gone. Trent's. Their place. The cracks had shifted into the shape of an open door. That night I tried sleeping on purpose, not to escape but to ask a question. If that wasn't a dream, then what was it? The answer didn't come in a voice. It came as a scene. The mirror again. But this time I wasn't alone with my reflection. Behind me stood the same figures I had passed in that place. They didn't reach for me. They waited. And then I understood the fear I couldn't name since the day I woke up. If the burns stayed, what else followed me back? Regret had, memory had, but something else had crossed with me, and it wasn't there to haunt. It was there to finish what began when my heart stopped. I opened my eyes in the dark of my room and felt a calm that didn't belong to me settle into my chest. Not relief, not triumph, a task. I knew the next step wasn't to prove anything to the people who didn't believe me, or convince the ones who already did. The next step was to go back. Not in body, but in truth. To face what the mirror still hadn't shown, and to ask for what the word on my skin had demanded. If you've ever carried a near-death experience, a nightmare that feels like judgment, or a moment that changed what you believe about heaven, hell, and the soul, tell me below. What do you think followed me back, and what would you do if it followed you? Leave your comment and like so I know you're here with me. In the next video, I'm going to open the door the cracks formed and follow where it leads, because what waited on the other side is the reason I can't rest yet.